what are the principles? One of the things that you have to pay attention is to look at the meaning of the word, okay? But not just like in a dictionary. So a lot of people, one of the problems when you're reading in very early stages, the dictionaries actually turn you off. Okay? That's one of the problems. So you have to kind of basically play with the words, okay? Not just look at the words. Now, nowadays we have the thing that with all of the tablets and phones that we have, you can look at things very easily, okay? But still, it kind of is very dry. So you have to look, for example, when you take a word, you have to look at synonyms of that word. How are other words related to that word? Antonyms sometimes, if that's not necessarily things that are in opposition to that. What part of the speech sometimes is useful to kind of group words, for example, nouns, and then verbs that indicate action, adjectives that are comparisons, and so on and so forth. And then always use real life examples, and that's what we try to do in class. So kind of basically take the word and put it in context. And using drawings and pictures like we've been doing, okay? Sometimes you put an image on that. And then acting it out, okay? Get involved with it. So, for example, talking about your own experience related to that word. What have you done related to that particular word? What is your experience like the other day when we were talking about activities and so on, so that you normally do, okay? So that's one thing. You have to emphasize how words relate to each other, okay? Words are never in isolation, okay? They always work with each other. That sounds like I'm losing my voice. Anyway, so you have these boundaries of words. Now this is kind of, whoa, it's too much. But you'll be surprised when you start to put words down, how they relate to other words that you already know. Okay, so that's the thing. These three things. I don't know, have you ever used this for learning in other subjects? When I used to be in grad school, I did it all the time, these kind of diagrams. And especially for concepts, you put the concepts together. Okay, they link them. And I used to have arrows like this, and sometimes they would go like back here, and so on and so forth. So the arrows are normally going from up to down, but they could go backwards. Okay? So that's the idea to interrelate things. So these are what we call semantic families. Okay, semantic families. Like I mentioned, to promote the use of words. Okay, so you have to have reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Like I mentioned the other day, when you learn vocabulary, it's important that you handwrite. Actually, it's not just writing, typing, but actually handwrite. Because as you write, the brain is also kind of basically looking at the encoding, the spelling, and so on and so forth. You have to use it in speaking with other people, and so on and so forth, in group activities, okay? We try to do sometimes. And then always read it out loud. I mentioned that the other day, okay? Because speaking and listening, as you're speaking, you're hearing yourself, okay? Group activities we try to do in class, okay, as you know. And then create opportunities for interacting with those words. Okay? For example, playing with them. We're going to do some of that throughout the semester. So we take words and we try to basically play with them. Review is very, very important. Okay? It's not the case that once you learn a word, that's it. You're done with it. Okay? You have to kind of go back. You know that for other subjects as well, right? So you have to go back and review that word. So. The important thing is that once you have a word that you think has already, that you're familiar with it, that you're comfortable with it, then put the new words in association with that word that you have already encoded. Okay, so that's the idea. So new ones come in and they join the other groups that you already know. Okay? So that's the idea that you have. Okay. So what are some of the techniques that you can use? And this is, for example, is coming up in one of our lessons. So you have basically associations like this. So for example, if we take the word la comida, right? So what are things associated with la comida? So we have, for example, animals like that we eat, like for example, pescado, drinks that we take as we eat, okay? Other things like cereales, vegetables, verduras, fruits, meat, okay, in general, not just fish. And so you have there, with the concept of eating, comida, you have already a bunch of other products that are basically interrelated with each other. Okay? So this is the way of mapping things. So you learn the word comida, okay? You feel comfortable with this word, and then you start to associate other things, like for example, pan, la pasta, el arroz, and I've said many times that you have to use the article in Spanish. Because again, every time you say that article, your brain is encoding that word, okay? So it's registering that word in your brain, okay? So look at the bunch of words that we have here now associated with that, okay? Now, if you learn the word yogur, leche, queso by itself, that would not be as easily encoded in your brain as if you encoded it like this, okay? So that's what we're talking about, family or semantic groupings of words. This is what is called the Frayer Model. And basically you take a word, a term, so you put it in the middle. You look up a simple definition, try to get as simple definition as possible for that word. Because some dictionaries kind of give a very lengthy definition. You want something that you understand basically what the word means. You can use, for example, a synonym sometimes. Instead of the full definition, use a synonym that can talk a little bit about that word, some of the characteristics that are reflected on that word, okay? And then you use examples where that word occurs, and non-examples where that word doesn't occur. Sometimes, we think even when you work across languages, we think that everybody says the same thing, the same way, but that's not the case, okay? So we have certain expressions, certain combination of words that work in some languages, but they don't work across for the other language, okay? So, for example, escribir un trabajo, okay? So that's a common expression in Spanish. That's to write a thing. But you don't say in English to write a word, right? So you have to, when you learn the word to write, okay, escribir, you have to know that one of the things that goes with escribir is trabajo. Okay? But if you translate this to write and this as work, if you say to write a work, that just doesn't work. Okay? So the association of words is very important. Okay? So when you learn the word escribir, one of the things that you're going to be using as positive examples are, for example, trabajo. Escribir trabajo. Okay? These are another good example of semantic mapping. So we have, for example, animales vertebrados, right? So instead of learning just mamíferos, reptiles, peces, you associate them all. So now you have animales vertebrados, anfibios, peces, aves, reptiles, mamíferos. And then mamíferos, you can give examples, okay? Or amphibios, you can have examples, rana, example. Vertebrados, peces, okay? Osos, aves, so on and so forth. So that's how you should. So you should make all kinds of maps with these vocabulary as you learn them. Let's look at another example here. This is another interesting example because it's not just the words and their family, but actually things that relate to, for example, what products we get out of the animals. Okay. So I mean, normally you wouldn't associate necessarily a cheese with a cow, right? That's a word, right? Of course we know that cheese comes from the cow. But if you think of them as products, then you have leche, queso, and now you're associating them with vaca. And you have carne and huevos, okay, also related, well, not the same kind of carne, but this is normally what the chicken would look like, but it's carne, right? And you have embutido and carne with cerdo, okay? And queso also with oveja. Okay? So you can see, so queso here is twice, right? So you can see how they're relating with this. But this is an interesting way because they're all granja, related to granja. So there are animals that live in the granja, right? And then you have the products that are associated with them. That's what you want to do. Here's another example of the same one that I mentioned before, but now with some visual aids. Okay? So again, the other one is dry. So what you want to do is you want to add as many graphic elements as possible, so pictures. And it's so easy nowadays to just add pictures of things. Here's one that we kind of did the other day. Okay? So for example, these are activities. So it's not just necessarily nouns. In this case, it's verbs. For example, cenar, ver, acostarse, hacer deporte, comer, terminar de trabajar, ducharse, levantarse. What do they all have in common? A rutina, right? That's what we were talking about the other day. Right? So again, if you put them like this, then you start to see relationships. So every time when you think about, for example, almorzar, you're also thinking about ver televisor. And when you see televisor, you think about acostarse. Your brain is putting them together. Okay? So it's much easier to associate. Here's another one that is kind of related to food that is coming up in our lessons soon. So here's things related to gallina. Right? So we have all the kinds of products. But look how far we go. So we go from pollo, which comes from the gallina directly, huevo, which comes directly. But we have all the way to, for example, other things that we make in combination. So for example, mayonesa, we don't make with the chicken, but we make with the egg. Right? So as you learn the word egg and gallina, you can also learn the word mayonesa. Okay? And for example, ceviche, okay? Mollejas, embutidos, because they're carne, okay? That is related to carne. So you can see how you're relating things. Okay? And again, using graphic materials, and it's so easy nowadays with the web to kind of get things like this. This is how you want to learn your vocabulary. So there are two processes. First, you have to acquire, you have to learn it by reading out loud, and I would put the adjectives, the articles, with these things always. Okay, you can write it by hand. And then read it out loud, and then practice with it. So for example, you can cover one, you can cover, or you can delete all of this and then write them in by hand, and so on and so forth. You can do all kinds of manipulation. So what things do you normally do? So you would take a word. So let's take one word, for example, carne. Right? And then you start to associate things. Can anybody tell me a word associated with carne? We've already mentioned one, right? Gallina. Right? Can anybody think of another one? Pollo. Okay. Otra. Vaca. Okay. Cerdo. Okay. Now, can anybody tell me a word associated with gallina? Huevos. Okay. Pollo is kind of very similar to that. But can you think of another word related to pollo? Like chicken wings? How do you say that in Spanish? Alitas de pollo? Never heard that? Never heard of this? I'm sure you had chicken wings right before. Alitas de pollo. You can say it in singular actually. Alitas de pollo. Otra cosa relacionada con cerdo. ¿Ah? Bacon, okay. ¿Y otra cosa asociada con vaca? Leche. Leche. Okay, let's see if we can go a little bit further. Otra cosa asociada con leche. Queso. Mantequilla. Okay. Yogur. Otra cosa asociada con huevo, ya lo hemos visto, mayonesa. Otra cosa asociada con alitas de pollo. Can you think of something? When you have chicken wings, what do you put in? Salsa. Yeah, salsa. Especially spicy one, right? Y otra palabra asociada con bacon. What do you normally have with bacon? Eggs. Right? So you can say huevos. Now here we have a word that is repeated twice. So you can see, okay, how you're kind of relating. So now we could write it twice, or you can just relate gallina and so on and so forth. Okay? So you need to make these maps. So the next thing you know, you have a huge map of words. Okay? So, and again, in all these cases, I'm trying to go fast, but you put the article for all of these. So that's basically a way to do it. And we did this the other day a little bit like this. So here in this case was cocina, was the word, if you remember. And then you have things related to cocina. Okay? So we have all kinds of things. Cucharillas, interruptor. So notice that the only relationship of these words to a cocina is location in many cases. Okay? So for example, interruptor, you don't eat that, right? But it's a switch. Normally all kitchens have that. Detergente, you don't eat that, right? But you wash the dishes. Okay? So aquí también podemos poner, por ejemplo, cacerolas. So cacerolas is related to detergente, because you wash, with the detergente. And los tenedores y las cucharillas se lavan con el detergente. So you can see how you related to this. So these are great, these maps. There are many books like this that to learn vocabulary. This is how you want to acquire it. So notice that the articles are there. Okay? And you have the visual aspect of it. Okay? Now what I would do is if I had this, I would print it out and then I would put arrows related to, like if you see it in the drawing, like for example here, okay, and so on and so forth. So visually you're associating them with the image in the picture. Now there are all kinds of things on the web that you can use. So for example, this is from Google. Some of them you have to pay, but there are a lot of tools, digital tools that you can use for vocabulary review that are free. It's amazing how many things are free nowadays. The same thing for reading, right? You can read, for example, and I mentioned that earlier, at your level. You don't want to go from starting with English to Shakespeare, all right? Because it's going to turn you off. You're going to go, I don't get this. So you have to learn slowly. So there are vocabulary builders like this that you can start with elementary, then to go to intermediate, and go to advanced, and so on and so forth. So that's how you can do. Children's books are great for language learning. Okay? You can start like a child does. We have to kind of basically imitate. So this is one from Google, and I've used it for the languages that I normally learn. Now, another thing that is very useful, even though it's a little bit dry, is the morphological analysis of words. Okay? One of the things that human languages does is that you can take a word, and then you can make words with that word. Right? So that's what we call morpheme. So for example, we have cocina, and we have cocinar, right? So what we have taken is the word kitchen, and we have added another morpheme, R, and then we have another word. So basically how the human brain works is that we don't have cocina and cocina. We have cocina and the possibility of adding in as a verb. Can anybody think of another word related to cocina? Who cooks? Who is the cook? Cocinero. Okay, so you have again cocina, and then we have ero, and it's a profession. Okay? So that's how the human brain, a Spanish brain works. So you have cocina as a concept, and you have these morphemes to it. So you see that that's a very economical way of doing it. All languages have this. Okay? So you have derivational forms. This is what we call derivational morphemes. Okay? So we have cocina, cocinero, so on and so forth. Okay? So this is the morphological way of organizing things. And I normally recommend that you kind of group things by concept. So the concept here would be noun. Okay? That seems to be the main thing. And so anybody involved with the kitchen is cooking, and a person that is a profession related to cocina is cocinero, and so on and so forth. Okay? So I would say that the word, the main word here, the main concept is the noun. Okay? So you have to take a word that is basically at the root of it. Here you can see when you start grouping words like this, as morphemes, you can see how you can have all kinds. So normally you have the nouns, adjectives, verbs, and prepositions. There are no listed here. There are listed adverbs, but prepositions also. Prepositions are, oh here they are. Prepositions. So you start to relate things morphologically. Okay? So here, for example, verbs. Now you know verbs we also conjugate. Okay, so that's another kind of morphology that we call grammatical morphology. So you know the conjugations, right? So you have como, comes, come, and so on and so forth. Right? So now again, the brain learns the word come or comer, and then you add these morphemes to make all the forms. Right? So that's another word. If you learn the word, a verb, normally we encourage you to learn the conjugation of that verb. So for example, comer, you have to use that in the present, you have to be able to use that in the past. You have to be able to use that in the future and so on and so forth. Okay? So como, comeré, comía, comí, and so on and so forth. So that's another word. Once you learn a verb, make sure that you conjugate that verb, okay? And do it out loud. Okay? So this is basically the mental map that we have, okay? El mapa mental. So we have the word, basically the root, and then you add morphemes to it, okay? And then you can make derivation, like I was mentioning, that's cocina, cocinero, and so on and so forth. Or you can make, you can add other affixes, okay? Or you can use the grammatical morphemes added to it. Okay? So this is an example of this kind of thing. So we have the word fruta, which seems to be the root of it. And from fruta we have afrutado. What does afrutado mean? Fruity, right? Afrutado. Disfrutar. Did you know that disfrutar comes from fruta? To enjoy. Disfrutar is to enjoy in Spanish, but it comes from fruta. Okay? Disfrute, frutal, frutería, frutero, a bowl, right, where you put the fruit, fruticola, fruticultor, and so on and so forth. Okay? But also compound words like, for example, lavafrutas, a place where you wash the fruit. Okay? And here we have carne. So we have carne, carnación, carnada, carnadura, and so on and so forth. So you have all kinds of examples. Let's see another one here. Oh, this I wanted to put them all together. So here you have the first one that I showed you, with comida, the semantic grouping. We have here that are basically activities. Right? So this is the semantic grouping with the word comida. This is, remember, the purpose. Okay? So this is semantic grouping, this is purpose related, and this is activity related, and this is the morphological thing.